just waiting for Allison whenever she pops up, and we will get started. So far with me, I have Valor. If any of you know about Valor, you know Valor is for courage and confidence. So I have been inhaling this as I dive into teaching about essential oils and emotions, which is truly one of my favorite subjects to teach about. And my all-time favorite oil, which is frankincense. If you know me, you know this one was a game changer for my skin, but it is an extremely grounding oil. And the two together are like a magic emotional duo bendo for me. So I just breathe those in very deep. If you have any oils with you, feel free to grab and diffuse, and we will dive into oils and emotions. I want to say this is part 1 of a part 2 series, and I thought that it was important to break them up because there's so much science that goes into inhalation and using essential oils to help with our emotions, that I wanted to really get into the science aspect of it pretty deep. Here comes Allison. And then my part 2 is going to be more of actual oils and going over what oils are great for your emotions, how to use them, stuff like that. Hi, Allie.
It worked.
Oh, good job. I just explained that this is a part 1 of part 2 series. So if you leave today not knowing what to do with oils, but knowing the science, that was the goal. So the goal is to break down the science, get you familiar with the human body and how it works, and confident in what you're doing. And then part 2, which is next Thursday, we'll go over more testimonies and actual oils that we can use for our emotions. So with that said, this is my beautiful, perfect friend, Allison.
Far from the truth, but
Me and Allison played volleyball together at Belmont and have been best friends ever since. She is truly super smart, and I can say that because I started off in biology with her, and she was biology student of the year.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
She is brilliant. She went on to physician's assistant school where she is practicing that now, with a spinal surgeon, and her husband is in his last year of residency at Vanderbilt. So they together are a brain power duo, and Allison just not only is smart, but she has such a love for Jesus and such a love for helping people. So when I teach classes with her, it's just the perfect combo because she brings so much wisdom and so much science, but she also brings such a heart to help people. So, Allie, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. So I am going to try and break this down in a way that is helpful and simple, but not too boring and not too overwhelming, but kind of give everyone like a factual, but, broad understanding of kind of the beginning of, the science of all this.
I love that.
If it gets too overwhelming and you're like,
I'll give you a thumbs down.
This is enough. Yeah, send a thumbs down.
No, never. We want more. We love it.
Okay, so whenever, and Hannah and I have taught this class before. So whenever I start, I kind of like to start explaining something called the HPA axis. And so what the HPA axis, it stands for hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And basically what the HPA axis is, it's like the powerhouse of basically controlling a significant amount of our metabolic functions in our body. So when we learned about the HPA axis in school, it's kind of described as an air conditioning unit in your house. So when your air conditioner and the HPA axis work on negative feedback loops. And so basically what that means is, if you think about your air conditioning, if you have your air conditioning in your house set at 70 degrees, if the temperature goes above that, your air conditioner is going to kick on because it senses that it's too hot in your apartment. So then the air is going to come on, it's going to cool it back down, it's going to drop below 70 degrees, realize that it's cool enough, so then the air is going to shut back off. So a lot of our metabolic hormonal processes in our body work like that. The beginning of your thyroid function starts in your hypothalamus. The precursor hormone gets released. Your body senses that, triggers it to produce TSH, which then produces thyroid hormone. And that kind of that cascade process is true with a lot of different metabolic functions. And so we get down to the adrenal glands, which are responsible for the production and regulation of cortisol. And some of you guys may have heard of cortisol before. Basically, you know, I feel like when most people hear cortisol, they think stress, right? You know, in periods of stress, we can measure increased levels of cortisol in the body. So that's kind of the HPA axis. So we'll take that, put it aside for now. Next thing that we, you know, kind of will need to introduce is something called the blood-brain barrier. And what the blood-brain barrier is, it was discovered, I think, back in like 1912 or the 20s, a while ago. But basically, researchers found that there was this extremely tight barrier that protects the central nervous system. Central nervous system is the brain, spinal, you know, brain,
Right.
stem, spinal cord.
Yeah.
And so there is this thing around it called the blood-brain barrier, and it's an extremely tight-knit structure. We know that a lot of the tissues in our bodies are a little bit more open, a little bit more porous. Our skin, for example, we know that things can pass in and out of it. The blood-brain barrier is not like that. It is extremely regulated, very, very tight, very, very, you know, structurally dense. I will not go into all of the structure of that because that's too much even for me sometimes. But the important thing to know about the blood-brain barrier is that it is so protective of the central nervous system that it makes drug delivery to the central nervous system really difficult. So finding drugs that treat central nervous system conditions like Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis is really challenging because it's really hard to find molecules that are structurally small enough to enter into that part of our body. Gotcha. And that is, we'll get to that in a minute, but that's one amazing thing about essential oils is the constituents and molecules of them are small enough that there have been studies that have shown that they can actually penetrate that barrier and have not only physical but also emotional effects down the line. Okay, so are we good?
Yes, I love it. You're doing great.
Okay, so going back to kind of why we're here, how essential oils play into all of this. So we know that essential oils are volatile compounds and they, you know, they have smells, right? If you smell a bottle of lemon, it smells very different than a bottle of peppermint. And the sense of smell is directly linked to something called the limbic lobe, which is almost like an emotional warehouse of the brain. And if you think back, you know, and we've said before when we've taught this class, you know, if you smell the cologne of an old boyfriend, you are immediately brought back to when you were dating that boyfriend. Or if you smell, you know, something like a certain dish being cooked in the kitchen, you'll remember back to, you know, when you were cooking with your mom. Or if you smell pine, you might think of when you went to go get a Christmas tree and you saw them cut down the Christmas tree. So that sense of smell, that when those essential oils get released, that triggers something called, you know, something in the limbic lobe. And so that sense of smell is basically a direct channel into the central nervous system. So really how all of this connects, and, you know, I wish that I could, like, I was going to print out little charts, but you can't.
Oh, you're so cute.
But so if you think about, so, you know, if I inhale abundance right now, I'm going to inhale this. It is going to hit my olfactory system. The olfactory nerve controls our sense of smell, which can then enter the limbic system into the brain. That then can get transferred to the amygdala, which is part of the brain stem, again triggering, you know, emotions and memories. And, you know, in the amygdala is stored, for example, serotonin. And so serotonin is responsible for, I mean, a ton of stuff in our bodies. And so just smelling something like, you know, rose oil can have a profound, not only physical, but emotional and mental change. I was reading last night, I'm going to read a quote from a study that I just thought was the coolest. So there was a study that was done on the effect of rose essential oil, just inhalation, on stress-induced skin barrier disruption in rats and humans. So basically, this study suggested that chronic stress-induced disruption of the skin barrier, so physical changes in the skin due to chronic stress, can be limited or prevented by just rose essential oil inhalation, possibly through inhibitory effects on the HPA axis. So cool. I mean, that is crazy. So literally just smelling an oil can have such profound mental, physical, emotional effects. And I mean, I know next week we'll talk a little bit more about testimonies and applications, but I mean, how many testimonies have we had of people who like get off antidepressants because of essential oils, and people who just have incredible healing from these amazing compounds. So
true. That's amazing.
Last study here that I just think is cool, and then I'll turn it over to you. So another study that looked at the blood-brain barrier and just the fact that, you know, we have struggles finding things that can penetrate it. So another study has been done with molecules like beta-alanine. Beta-alanine is rather, you know, also known as a sesquiterpene, which some of you may have heard that term before.
Right.
Sesquiterpenes are a constituent. And so constituents are what make up essential oils. Certain essential oils have higher percentages of certain constituents. Some have higher phenols, some have higher sesquiterpenes. And those constituents are what have the physical effects on, you know, on the cells that link into these receptor sites and link into these axes. And so there's research that beta-alanine has been studied in the treatment of brain tumors, suggested that it is able to cross that blood-brain barrier. So oils that are high in sesquiterpenes, I usually think of like thick oils, so vetiver, patchouli. And if you look through a lot of the emotional oils, if you read through in some of the emotional blends, a lot of them have sesquiterpenes in them. So not only are these oil blends made to smell amazing, because of course they do, but they also are made very intentionally with, you know, specific purposes and constituents in mind to have these desired, you know, physiologic and emotional effects.
So cool.
So cool. All right.
That's amazing. I love that.
Enough science to get a little background, but not too much to overwhelm, I hope. So
no, it's so good. It's so good to be able to break that apart and understand, like, and I will have, when I post this, have to post the diagram, but like, smell is one of our 5 senses that's directly associated with our limbic lobe, and that is so cool. So all of our senses, the only way we can actually access that is through smell and inhalation. It's so simple. So yeah, when you strictly just inhale an essential oil, it travels all the way through and goes into that center where our emotions are stored. But not just that, it's also our control center for heart rate, blood pressure, stress levels, hormone balance, all of that. So it has a direct correlation on that as well. So cool.
Yeah.
All right, this quote: 87 to 93% of disease comes from our thought life. So let me break this down. Our thoughts become emotions. Our emotions then become our attitude, and our attitude is a reaction, and all of these reactions make up our lifestyle. So these actually affect our lifestyle choices, and we know that lifestyle choices are a huge cause of just different sicknesses and disease, and obviously stress being one of those. It's biblical, you know, it says in Psalms 23:7, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So like, our thoughts have so much power. It also talks about our words in the exact same way. It says your tongue has the power of death and life.
Yeah.
So our thoughts and our words and what we say and what we speak has so much power that I don't think we give credit to it. So it's relearning how to change your vocabulary. So like, I don't want to talk about my kids in a negative light. I don't want to speak that over them. I want to speak life over them. And it's similar with our thought life. So when we allow these thoughts to get turn into these negative emotions and we don't deal with them, they get stored and lodged in our body. So I love this quote by Dr. Bradley Nelson in his book called The Emotion Code. It says, a trapped emotion is literally a ball of energy, and these will lodge anywhere in the body and disrupt our normal energy field. Mm-hmm. So this is going to go a little bit different, like going from like straight science into a less traditional way we've thought about things. But there's a direct correlation with emotions and then manifesting in different parts of our body. So, for example, anger. I'm just going to read these out, and then I'll give you like the kind of action to help you kind of get a hold of how this works. So, anger can be stored in your liver and gallbladder. Worry can be stored in your stomach. Grief can be stored in your lungs. Fear can store in the kidneys. Stress can be stored in the heart. So basically, our emotions aren't just in our head. You know, our emotions then can be stored in different parts of our body. So for this to make sense, have you ever been so nervous that your stomach hurt? Like that is your emotions getting lodged in your body. Have you ever been so sad that your lungs physically hurt? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been so stressed that your heart starts to hurt? You hear a lot of heart attacks being stress induced. You also hear that with stomach ulcers. It's just like those are just examples of kind of how you can see emotions taking toll in different parts of your body.
Yeah.
So for every emotion we experience, there's also a corresponding hormone being released in the body. So Allison talked about this a little bit earlier with cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that gets triggered a lot of times in stress. Now, there's obviously healthy amounts of cortisol, but excessive cortisol, excessive stress that's not dealt with can wreak havoc on our body. And on the flip side, there's happy hormones. So there's, serotonin and endorphins and different hormones that, elicit good and happy feelings and different things like that. So what Allison was saying with the importance of the blood-brain barrier is essential oils through inhalation only. Like nothing, not having to do anything crazy, just smelling them can cross through and get into that emotional center. Not only help trigger some of these emotions, but like heal them and bring them out. So I love the correlation you gave, Allison, about thinking of a past, like a moment in your past and having the smell trigger it. So like you said, it could be a cologne, it could be even just a scent from childhood, and you're not even thinking about that, but you smell it, and all of a sudden you have that emotional response of, oh wow, I remember this. I remember how I felt during this. Mm-hmm. I just had this actually with an oil. I was using Lauris nobilis. Have you smelled that one? Mm-hmm. I was using it a ton in March. It's a great respiratory oil.
Yep. So, I got it in March because it was like out of stock, and I was like, yeah, I'll get it. I don't know what I'll use it for, but everyone wants it.
Exactly. I'd never heard of it before. That one I need to do a whole class on because that one's super, super cool and smart. But I was using it every day in March. And then hadn't used it in a while, and I unpacked it the other day, and I was like, oh, and I like smelled it, and I felt like I could have transported back to my house in Nashville in March, and it elicited all these memories of like being there. And I mean, we don't have a home right now, so having a home and all of these things. So I got that same thing just from smelling it myself. Mm-hmm. So when you think about these emotions, it's so cool because it works on such a multifaceted level. One, it can work for the immediate emotion. I'm having a hard day. I'm going to use oils to help just change my attitude. But then you can actually go a level deeper, and you can actually go into trauma, and you can start unlocking and unleashing and healing some of that. So yeah, I'm going to go back into a little bit of science, and I want your help with this, Allison. But I'm going to talk basically about just the cell. So I'm going to need your help on the receptor site part because you're smarter than me. But so we're made of tons and tons of cells. Like that is our makeup. And our cells, just like our brains, have a memory. So the nucleus, which is inside of our cell, it's also where our DNA is produced. Is this correct?
Yep, keep going.
Okay, where our DNA is produced tells the cell what to do. So this is where, Allison, I want you to take over and explain the role of receptor sites. So the information goes through the cell, goes into the nucleus, and that's where it stays in communication, right? It keeps things working properly. So how does the information pass through? There's these receptor sites. What is the role of that, and why are they important?
Yeah. So on the outside of the cell, you think about the outside of you've got your cell membrane on the outside. The nucleus is somewhere in the middle. So the the cell membrane has the ability, you know, for things just like your skin to go in and out, but it has, you know, it has these little receptor sites on the outside, and there's tons and tons and tons of different receptor sites, all that are responsible for different functions. And so when I think about receptor sites, the way that I think about them is in the role of something like a medication. So for example, if you are going to take a medication for depression, the antidepressant is working on a certain receptor site in the cell. If you are going to take a medication for heartburn or reflux, that medication is going to act upon certain receptor sites in certain cells to trigger a downstream effect. So the role, basically a receptor site, you know, if a receptor site's here, this molecule fits that receptor site, it's going to attach to that receptor site, which is going to basically tell the cell, do this.
Gotcha. Okay. Yes. Super cool. So what's interesting is that negative emotions can actually block our receptor cells. So having those same like emotions, same stress, all of that is going to actually block those receptor sites. That is going to inhibit communication. So what is so fascinating is those beautiful constituents Allison was talking about earlier. You have phenol, sesquiterpenes, and monoterpenes. Basically, that is like the chemical structure of the constituents that make up the structure of essential oils. Those can go in and not only clean them, but they can bring air and do all these amazing things. So phenols, which is a constituent in oils, cleans and repairs receptor sites. So the damage that these fear-based negative emotions that we've caused can be cleaned by inhaling essential oils. As simple as that. Sesquiterpenes bring oxygen to the brain, which helps our amygdala, which is that emotional processing center, work as it should. So that is really, really cool. So not only does it help in the immediate of just the here and now, this is how I'm feeling, it's going to help clean and repair and restore and make whole again. It's overall wellness. It's not masking it. It's not saying, oh, you're upset, here, smell this joy oil, it'll mask it and go away. It's not saying that. It's saying, no, we're actually going to dig deep. We're going to dive into some of these things that have been locked, that have been, you know, stuck in there, and we're going to open them up, and we're going to help restore, and we're going to help heal. Essential oils, that's their goal, is for homeostasis. Their goal is for overall balance and well-being. So I want to give a couple of talk about two more things, just because it's really fascinating. I don't know if any of you know who Dr. Ollie Winker is. If you just Google him, he is brilliant, and I thoroughly enjoy listening to him. But he has a book called The Ancient Secrets of Essential Oils, and he does this thing called brain mapping, and you can actually Google a video of it, where he puts on this cap, and it's connected to different electrodes and whatnot, but it basically shows his brain on the computer, and it shows what happens when he inhales different essential oils. So to break it down, there's different speeds our brain functions at. There's 5 speeds: gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And when he has his brain hooked up to this thing, it basically, he'll smell an oil, and it won't only show which part of the brain is being activated, left, right, you know, frontal, all of that, but it shows what his actual brainwave activities are doing. So when he inhaled lavender, his brainwaves immediately started to slow down. We know lavender is very calming, so they started to slow down, and his beta activity decreased. Beta is the active activity, and that's strictly from inhaling lavender. When he inhaled lemon, it activated the part of his brain that helps him with his ability to listen. So it increased his brain activity. It increased that beta. It increased his ability to listen. When he smelled peppermint, it did the same thing with beta, helped him to focus and helped him to concentrate. It went to the side of his brain that's positive and analytical. And he did these in different orders. So he would literally like trigger the beta, and then he'd smell the lavender and calm down. And then he'd do the peppermint, and then he would do frankincense. So like it was so cool to watch. Frankincense, he went into, I want to say that was alpha. His eyes were closed, and that was his creative stage. And that's where it slows down and it's calming. And like I said at the very beginning, frankincense is very grounding. There's so many documents, even in the olden age, of people using frankincense as a very grounding oil. I mean, you think about old churches, that's what the incense is.
Yeah.
So those are just some examples of real life. You can watch essential oils and how they're affecting different parts of your brain, how they're affecting what's being activated, what's not, how that's directly affecting your emotions. You know, when your brain activity slows down, you're calmer, you're more relaxed. So cool to think about kids. Like immediately, I was like, heck yeah, let's diffuse lemon peppermint when we're trying to teach our kids, and why don't I do this when when I'm trying to learn. So that's
I would always diffuse clarity and peppermint when I studied in PA school.
I love that. I love that so much. And then we know there's an association with smell to memory, so it's probably going to help you recall things better on your test too.
Yeah, there are studies about that too with test recall and oils. We won't get into that now, but
but that's actually a good point. I want to point out there is so many studies done on essential oils, is particularly with emotions, and just go to pubmed.gov. I did a whole research article in college on peppermint essential oil and working out, and if it increases your athletic performance. There is so much knowledge out there. So dive into it. Okay, second thing I want to talk about in associating with just being able to physically watch how essential oils can affect your mood and your emotions. So frequencies, every living thing has a frequency. It's a vibrational energy. You can actually measure these. So I have a frequency. You can measure frequencies of us when we're healthy, frequencies of us when we're not feeling good. Our frequencies go down. Living foods have frequencies. Everything has a frequency. So essential oils have some of the highest frequencies known to man, which is really cool. So this really geeked me out because I knew I knew joy was an amazing emotional oil, and I knew it was created based off of the Bible verse in the Bible saying, put on the oil of gladness. But I did not know this until I was studying for this class. But when they made joy essential oil, they took our frequencies as humans of what our frequency is when we experience joy, and they picked plants and flowers that matched that vibrancy to put in joy. So when you're having a bad day, when you're stressed out, you can literally inhale joy and it will raise your frequency to the frequency you feel when you experience joy.
That's great.
How cool is that?
That is
I know. So that's just
so cool.
Science. That's super simple. Yeah. That's what I love about, I think everyone needs to know about essential oils for emotions. There's not a lot out there to help your emotions, truly.
Yeah.
And it's so simple. It's not having you do this crazy thing or take them or, like it's just smelling them. It's diffusing them. It's, putting them on your wrist, putting them in your hands, and deep breathing. There's so much science. We just broke it down of what happens just directly from putting them on my hands, breathing them in, and how it goes in there. And it can immediately help your moods. But then long term, which is what we're going to get into in part 2, which is next week, of really diving into how can we actually go into those deep-rooted emotions, the ones that have been stuck, the ones that have been trapped. What are things we can do to help bring those to light and help heal in a really healthy way? And then more application of oils. But Allison, before we leave, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I mean, it's just there. And what Hannah said, I think really is so true. There is a lot of information out there. There is research, there is science there, and, frequencies and, brain mapping. It is all such amazing, cool technology. So if there's something specific that you have questions about, whether it's a specific diagnosis or a specific oil that you just, that you have and you're like, what would this do?
Right.
Yeah, look it up. I mean, and there are so much out there. There's so much information, feel free to ask questions to Hannah or I.
Yeah.
And if we don't know the answer, we'll find it or find someone who does.
Right. Yeah.
But it really is so cool. And it's such, it is truly such a simple way to use oils. And there's just so much information there, and there's so much out there. So
yeah, I love that. Yeah. Well, thanks, Allison. I appreciate it. Can't wait for next week, but for now,
I can't wait for next week either.
Oh, you're so sweet. But yeah, just if anything, just start smelling your oils and.
Oh, and pro tip for those of you who already use oils, I meant to put Northern Lights, Black Spruce, and Christmas Spirit in my diffuser, but I accidentally did it Northern Lights and Abundance. But happy mistake, because it's pretty nice.
So, I love that. All right, I'm doing it. That's a good idea.